Hello, third lesson, being a sense existence. I hope that it's alright. We emphasized in the short spiritual training at the end of the first course the extreme importance of being willing to love the truth more than anything. In other words, to give it the place that comes naturally to it, that is to say the first, because it is greater than everything. It corresponds to the infinity of being and ultimately to God. Indeed, the truth is the fidelity of our mind to reality, because I am in the truth when what I think in my mind conforms to what is. No, reality is being, and we have seen that being has an infinite dimension because it represents all that is and all that can be. And so, if being reality has an infinite dimension, and if truth is a correspondence of my mind to reality, that means that truth has an infinite dimension like being. Besides, the truth is what our mind needs for food and light, as we have seen. And so, if truth has an infinite dimension, and if it must be our nourishment and our light, that means that it can be constitutive of our mind, and that, by the fact, we too can acquire an infinite dimension. It would therefore be inappropriate to pass before it, which is infinite, finite benefits of this earth, even ourselves, which are also finite, but called to an infinite dimension by it. In two words, the truth is greater than us. It has an infinite dimension, and it can communicate this infinite dimension to us, and therefore it would be absurd to prefer finite goods to it, however great they may be. To refuse, therefore, the truth having an infinite dimension for a finite good is ultimately to make the worst error, and this is equivalent to making a hole in our boat, which will eventually sink because the error, especially the accepted error, the active error, as we have seen, is a corruption of the mind, and corruption is a decomposition in being, which ends up making holes, and even decompose the whole being. And the importance of always putting the truth first in our lives. This is what the philosopher, all lovers of the truth, did, and it is a quality that Jesus loves so much. When, for example, he meets Nathanael and says to him, "Here is a true Israelite, in which there is no artifice, a true man who loves the truth in his knowledge as in his life." This is also extremely important in that the truth is our way to God. and to prefer something else to the truth is to leave this path, to go to finite goods, which are also good, but not as long as God, which is unfinished and for which we are made, and without which we cannot find true happiness. God is our goal. We were made for Him. We can do nothing about it. It is deeply engraved in our heart, in our nature, and not listening to our nature in what is good. It is a risk going against it, breaking it down, and hurting yourself very badly. So, this preparation of the heart for the reception of the truth, this purification is extremely important. To be well done, it would be necessary to get rid of all our attachments which are not really useful. Not that it is necessary to trip everything and live as an ermite in rags on a high mountain. We can even have very healthy distractions, like riding a horse, going to the theater. But we should, first of all, not be so attached to it that we pass what is secondary first, and secondly, on the contrary, order it to what must be first in our life. That is to say, the love of truth. The wise man is one who knows how to order his life according to the different values of things, by putting first what is first, and second what is second. And what could be more fair? And yet, how many people do it, even Christians? Hence, we see all the importance of ordering things in our life, of putting first what is first, and second or last what is second or last. And obviously, it is necessary to put first what has the most value, secondly, what has less, and lastly, what has little. This is what God is asking, in fact, and there is nothing that makes Him more injured than seeing His children use their intelligence like a broomstick and put first what is absurd, and lastly what is most valuable. Putting in man first that which is not of the greatest value is called idolatry. And God is very severe against this. And we see in Holy Scripture, because He does not understand how we can prefer things of less value, and neglect what has the most, that is to say Himself, for which we are made. We have seen that God is the infinite being and the infinite good for which our intelligence and our will are made. We cannot do anything. We cannot do anything. It is like that. We cannot do anything. It is like that. But what I want there too, to have been made for infinite good and therefore for infinite happiness. No one intelligent will blame him for that. It is therefore necessary to walk the land of our heart, so that it is most welcoming to the seed of the Word of God, of His revelation. Is the parable of the seed that fell on the ground, fallen along the way, on the stone, among the brambles, and in the good land. Obviously, the Lord Himself is intelligent enough not to sit by the wayside or on the stone or in the brambles. He wants to show us there that the earth is which He saw His truth, His pearl. There are free beings who choose themselves to be by the wayside, that is to say, trampled by anyone, what? Stone, that is to say, hard like it, brambles, that is to say, a real mess in us, or else, good soil, that is to say, a heart well prepared to receive this seed and make it produce fruit at the centuple. One could, for example, wonder, indeed, why all this teaching? What necessity? And the demon will not fail to present this temptation to you, giving you its usual arguments, so as, for example, that all the saints did not do philosophy, great studies, and yet they became saints by attaching themselves only to Jesus, by simply living the gospel. Yes, certainly. But is it so simple? If it's so easy, why do we see so few saints? Is it not because most people, even Christians, do not know all the riches of Catholic educations, nor do they know how to access them? And how can we know if not through solid training? And then it would take so many years of training to acquire human science, and to 25 years sometimes, up to 25 years sometimes. It would take 5 to 10 years to acquire professional training, and to live this superior life in God. It would be enough to read few pages of the Gospel from time to time. Do we not see there all the falsehood of the argument? The science of the sense is the most difficult, the highest, and if it takes so many time to undergo human training, how much does it take to undergo supernatural training? And even if we object that God is a teacher in His path, in this path of holiness, which is very true, God also wants us to form ourselves, and that in society, He wants that we train one another, because God made us to live in society and to acquire our good all together, helping us, others, in an organization full of wisdom, as we will see widely in the second year with human society, and in third year with a supernatural society, which is the church. And it is all the more urgent today to have a solid training, as we said, that terror abounds in all areas, and that, without being warned, we risk getting lost ourselves in every way of the term, even with a good culture. And then it's the Lord Himself who says it, to prepare our heart for His coming. He says it, and repeatedly, especially in this parable of the grain sown in the ground. We must therefore walk to listen the land of our heart, so as not to be a path beaten by current opinions, which often stand far from the truth. We must loosen this land, that is to say, dismantle these rigid opinions, too superficial to accept the deep truths, otherwise accepted on the surface. The demon will not be long in destroying it by his false argument. We must work to remove these stones from the field, like the farmers do. These stubborn, baseless ideas which prevent the plowshare from loosening the land and stifle the world. We must work to clear the bush, that is to say, as we said, to clear up this mess, to put everything in its place, according to its true value, to order everything for the ultimate goal, at the highest value, and eliminate the unnecessary which hinders. The Lord also commands us to deeply prepare the land of our heart, and not only superficially, when He says to dig long before to find the rock, which will serve as a solid foundation for the house of our life, which path will not risk collapsing at the slightest storm, where the house built on the sand, that is to say, on all this superficial life, without consistency, at the level of opinion and fleeting pleasures, collapses at the slightest storm. What we see achieved, unfortunately, today in our poor church, which chases to be depopulated, and that because we did not take seriously this advice from the Lord of preparing us very seriously to face adversities, not only violent but also, and these are the most dangerous, hidden under the false attractive appearance of good. Hence, not only the utility, but also the urgent need for solid training. Finally, we have seen that if we have our part to play in this journey towards our eternal good, most of it, all the same, comes to Him, without whom we could not do anything in this supernatural order. We have also seen that it is a love story which must be lived in freedom, that God will never come to violate because He wants to do so. And this extremely important stage in the spiritual life of the prayer of demand. God does not want anything better than giving us. He even wants to fill us. We will take the time to see that. But we must ask Him, because our freedom is involved, because it is a love story which must be lived in the extreme delicacy of love, where neither of them takes anything to the other without his agreement, and even his request, because love is to give, not to take. Far from it. So we have to ask God, ask Him the most impossible things. He can achieve them. He can do everything. He is the master of the impossible. But we have to ask Him, and that in order, in wisdom, according to true values. Ask first what is first, second what is second, last what is last. The first request to do to Him is therefore to help us to make order in us, to rediscover the order of true values, to understand how He is Himself our greatest good, for which we are made, and how to order our whole life towards this infinite good that He is. All right, now philosophy. We now approach the fundamental notions of metaphysics. What is metaphysics? And why do metaphysics, especially in a rather theological and spiritual formation? We have already talked about it, but we will clarify this point here. Metaphysics is a science. It is a science of being. What is a science? As we have seen, it is the art of discovering the truth with certainty in a field, and the result of this art. For example, mathematical science is the art of discovering the truth with certainty in the field of number and figures, and the result of this art. With mathematical science, one can find numbers from other numbers in given situations. For example, we can calculate the height of a tree from the shadow it casts on the ground without having to climb to the top. Or we can know with certainty that the sum of the angles of a triangle is equal to 2 rights. Another example, physico-mathematical science is the art to discovering the truth with certainty in the field of physics, that is to say, of being inert in movement and the result of this art. The science can be divided according to the degree of abstraction, as we have seen, and also according to domains, as we see here. As the domain of number, of inert being, of living being, of the knowing being with mathematics, physics, biology, and psychology. Today, science is very mathematical, but originally it was not so. Currently, we cannot study an area of reality without considering its quantity aspect, and that because we have become materialist. And one of the main properties of matter is quantity. What makes the question we often ask ourselves today is not what it is, the natural search of man, but what is its measure? This is what Einstein answered to Jacques Maritain, who asked him about being. What is this for me? He answered, for me, a physicist, reality is something measurable, which I measure, and from which I derive other measures. We thus understand how we are today next to the natural search of intelligence, which always wonders what is it, and who expect being to be answered. That is to say, this is that, and not what is its measure. It is important to consider the quantity aspect of nature, but it is not all of knowledge. It is only a part of it. This deviation comes in particular from Descartes, who have precisely interpreted nature in mathematical terms, because he was very fond of mathematics. At the beginning of this research, man better followed his natural inclination to seek being himself. And he observed nature by wondering what it is, and seeking to respond to it by definition, which gives us nature, the essence of things. What is a sun? It is a star that gives light and warmth to the earth and punctuates life on its surface. This does not mean that we are not looking for the being today, but the fact is that mathematics have taken on a very great importance in the sciences that they did not have before, and which divides the natural search for the man. Hence, at the beginning of man's research on nature, there was practically only one science called philosophy, which represented the totality of rational knowledge of nature. Next to history and poetry, says Robert's dictionary, philosophy was the love of knowledge, the desire to know for itself, without necessarily having a utility as a goal. Philosophy, therefore, in antiquity studied nature as it presented itself to simple observation. That is to say, the inert being, like rocks, minerals, living beings, like plants, living being and knowing sensibly, like animals, as we have seen, and living being knowing sensibly and endowed with reason, like man. The philosopher man, at the beginning of history, has asked his natural question in front of all this, while wondering, what is it? What is being inert? What is a living being? What is knowledge? What is a reason? From there are the branches of philosophy that still exist today. With regard to the body being, we have cosmology, which discovers the very important notion of matter and form, and those of causes discovered by Aristotle, which we will take the time to see. As man gathers in him the other parts, we study them in him to these things which we call anthropology. Word which means in Greek science of the man, and we study the man like a living being knowing and wishing sensibly and rationally. We have studied the functioning of knowledge, which with what is called logic, and the functioning of man in relation to his hand in morality or ethics. Who wonders what man does on earth, what he mainly seeks, and how he can achieve it? There has also been the question of a principle of the world in what is called natural theology, which naturally seeks what God is. We will see all this in these courses. So, as we said, in all this nature, man wonders what it is, and he answers this question by definition. For example, what is man? It is an animal endowed with reason. But to find that, we had to ask, what is an animal? And what is a reason? Answer, an animal is a living being that has sensitive knowledge. But to find that, we have to ask ourselves again, what is I? And what is sensitive knowledge? Answer, a living being is what has the function of nourishment, growth, and reproduction. And we can see that in a living being, we find matter, because a living being is a body being. In other words, it is a kind of being inert with, in addition, life. And it is the same thing for everything we want to define. Intelligence seeks, according to its natural tendency, to know what things are, their nature, their essence, to answer its question, what it is. And in seeking to answer it, she uses simpler notions. We cannot define a thing with less well-known notions than the thing to define. We always seek better known notions to make us know, understand, explain to us what the thing is which we are trying to know, nature essence. The essence of a thing is what it is, and what tells us what it is in the definitions. That is, the essence expressed in human words. In fact, essence is the meaning of words. And so, we are always looking for a simpler notion to express what we have understood about the thing, to explain it in what we call the definition. We see that there is something totally material, as we have already noticed, because the essence of something, like that of man, for example, which is to be a reasonable animal, you absolutely cannot represent it with a drawing. Ultimately, we could draw an animal to make it clear that it has animal in it. But anyway, the reason we cannot. And even if you draw an animal to represent the fact that man has an animal side in him, which animal would I choose to represent it? A horse, a monkey, an elephant? Rather a monkey, but even so, this drawing will not correspond correctly to what I want to express. With this drawing, we could understand Mars is a monkey would have the reason. This is not what I mean. This is not what I mean. I mean that man is a reasonable animal in the sense that he has the functions of the animal in the most general sense, without considering an animal of a particular species, We thus understand how this subject, essence, nature, what the thing is, what I want to express by definition, is completely immaterial. Because it is a question of replacing something general, universal, which can never be expressed by any particular being, like the notion of animal. I found this notion of essence in all animals and in humans, and therefore it is something quite real, but which is at the same time totally material. Similarly, the notion of furniture, I can express it by a definition with simpler notions, but I absolutely cannot represent it by a drawing, although the thing itself is material and representable by a drawing. But what defines the thing, the piece of furniture, I can absolutely not draw, because I could never make a drawing of what is essentially a piece of furniture. I can take examples of furniture or various kinds to make people understand. But what a piece of furniture is, precisely, is definition. I cannot absolutely draw it. I can only express it by a definition. With words, definition which will explain to me what it is, which answers the question what it is. That is to say, its essence, its nature. A piece of furniture, according to Robert Dictionary, is a mobile object of rigid forms, generally resting on the ground, contributing to the arrangement of housing, of private or public premises. We see that the definition itself strictly, one cannot absolutely represent it by a drawing. It is something completely immaterial, and which is, however, real, because it is the expression of the essence which makes the thing what it is, and which answers the question that intelligence poses, what it is. It is the object of intelligence which captures only the intangible, this immaterial, that is to say, the essence, which answers its question, what it is. All right, end of this first part. We will see the second.